Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I have a good conspiracy,
Oh,
potentially
great.
conspiracy twist. So I made a resolution last night because that I should start watching the news more, and by the news I mean like the mainstream news, because I never watch the
Oh,
mainstream news.
that's an
You know,
entertaining idea.
like I should actually watch Fox News once a month, and I should watch like ABC News tonight or whatever. So I watched ABC News last night at 6:30 before the opening day at Fenway, um, and okay, I just wanted to. These were the main stories on the news last night. This is a corporate, mainstream news. Okay, the COVID death toll is rising. Okay, that's fine.
Right.
McDonald's is now requiring masks. So, like, I don't know, that was like the second story. So that's
Right.
important. Um,
Right.
and then they talked about an ER doctor's recovery after 39 days on a ventilator. So this was like the human interest story of the doctor recovering from COVID. The Gulf storm is strengthening. An Iranian passenger jet was threatened by an F-15 over Syria. It wasn't threatened, but an F-15 flew within half a mile of a Iranian passenger jet, and they were forced to descend like 15,000 feet very, very quickly, and there were numerous injuries on the plane. I'll come back to that. The U.S.-China showdown. There was a pool emergency in Pennsylvania where somebody had thrown in muriatic acid with the chlorine, so it created chlorine gas, and apparently people were coughing and stuff. I don't know why this was in the national news, but this was the national news story.
Wow.
Um, a high school in Virginia has been renamed for John Lewis. That was also in the national news. And there was a passenger brawl on a flight to Philadelphia. And it spilled over to the airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico. There were ads for arthritis, pain medication, car insurance, cat food, a new car interior liner, memory loss pills, breast cancer medication, more car insurance, cell phones, shapewear, pet food, an ad for Biden, and more arthritis gel and bathroom cleaner. Then they announced that the president's former fixer, without any kind of irony, they just announced, well, the president's former fixer, Michael Cohen, was released from prison, and that the FAA is inspecting 737s for possible engine shutdowns due to corrosion. So that's another kind of scare story. And then everything ended with a hero's homecoming, hashtag America Strong, that a doctor had to separate from his family because of COVID, and then he was reunited, and they showed his kids running up to him. And the newscast ended with, glad they're back together, and a smile, and then fade out. Okay, so it's interesting. Okay, there's a lot of these human interest stories, or stories that supposedly that people can relate to. So like McDonald's requiring that you wear a mask. This means when you go to McDonald's, you have to wear a mask. That's going to affect a lot of people, the everyday people, the plebs, right? So they would talk about it. Or the pool situation where they had, people were got exposed to chlorine gas at this pool. Nobody died, and nobody even necessarily went to the hospital, but just it's scary because people can identify with that. You go to a pool.
But yeah, that's national news.
That's national news. Now, I know it was Friday night.
Yeah.
And it was kind of slow. And I know some of the other networks have been covering Portland and stuff, but of course, on this one, in any case, there was no mention of Portland or unrest.
Wow.
No foreign news. Nothing going on in Europe. And the one thing that was interesting with this Iranian passenger jet that was forced to descend quickly, and they showed the children, upset and everything. Why would they be showing an Iranian passenger jet? Because Iran's our enemy, right? Why would they be showing an Iranian passenger jet? They're showing somehow that the Iranians are human, that they're actual people, because you're seeing people on this jet, and they actually look like regular people who were scared because they were forced to descend 15,000 feet because of this F-15. So I thought that was I was wondering what the reasoning was behind that. But I guess the conspiracy angle is, is there, obviously there is some kind of pressure exerted on mainstream media from the top in terms of what you can cover and what you cannot cover. So they don't, at least in this particular, I'd have to watch more, I guess, to be fair, but in this one newscast last night, they didn't mention any of the unrest. They didn't mention stimulus money. They didn't mention some of these things that we're talking about is like the major issues of the day were not mentioned.
Yeah.
But the pool issue in Pennsylvania was mentioned, or there was a fight in the airport in San Juan. They showed people like pushing each other, in the waiting area of the San Juan airport. I mean, how is that? It's
so
not
what
really,
I'm gathering from all these stories is that it's a whole lot of fear mongering and not a lot of educating people. That's what the news is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be a way of educating your people on what's going on.
Well, educating,
I
think,
the
is
pertinent issues going on in your community or in the world.
Is a kind word. I mean, I would say more it's indoctrinating, because not only are they scaring, they're fear mongering, but they're also like, there's all these hero stories. It began and ended with a hero story of someone who, recovered from this. They beat COVID and they're a hero. And then they have, hashtag America Strong at the end, and the doctor coming home and hugging his kids and everything. I think it's like, if we just rally together as Americans, we come together, we can beat this. And the real enemy, of course, is COVID, right? In this message, not Jeff Bezos, and not not
right.
Congress.
And it also it puts the onus of everything that's going on, like deep down the message is that it's everything that's going on is either our fault or controlled by us. It has nothing to do with the ineptitude of our Congress or, just the disaster capitalism or anything like that.
They're out of the picture. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It's all because you don't wear your mask.
There's no context. There's no context.
Yeah. What was it? It was when I was growing up, there was a channel that did a really good job of just like, seemed like talking about, effects on people's lives. And why isn't there a segment every week or every night on some family that's, financially struggling because so-and-so lost their job and this one's still working, but limited hours because of the restaurants, only doing takeout, and they can't, they're 3 months behind. I mean, that's the story that tells the story of what people are going through right now. That should be on every night.
When I was a kid, there were 3 networks, right? There was NBC, CBS, and ABC, and everyone watched CBS because it was Walter Cronkite. Maybe you watched, whatever it was, Brinkley and whatever on Channel 4, or NBC. But mostly it was Walter Cronkite who read the news to you in a very paternalistic, but avuncular way, and people they felt very comfortable with that. And it was like the news, and they didn't have these human interest stories of people coughing at a pool in Pennsylvania. I mean, how important is that? But that kind of stuff didn't really become prominent until I could say the 70s. In the 70s, they started bringing this stuff out of the news because they tried to make it more like Newsertainment, because they were losing market share to other shows at the same time. And then you had all these shows like A Current Affair and stuff, which are basically Newsertainment. So they would take Hollywood figures and try to make that into news.
Well, wasn't it, I think it was Chris Hedges that said that it was 60 Minutes that actually ruined the news, because because before 60 Minutes came around, the news wasn't seen as something that was profitable. But then once they saw the success of 60 Minutes and that it could be entertaining for people, then that's when things kind of merged, because the news became something that was profitable. I believe it was Chris Hedges that relays that story.
I think that was a big part of it, yeah.
And it was probably specifically the gotcha nature of that was the most they didn't start out necessarily doing that, but that turned out to be the most popular part. Was when they start talking to some manufacturer of a chemical at a chemical company, and they don't tell them at the beginning that they're going to be talking about how his product is killing children or something like that, and then they turn it on them. That was the most exciting part. So that's a great observation, Daisy. That definitely could have led to everything that the news has become.
Also the personalities. I mean, you had Walter Cronkite in the 60s, but basically It was very, I mean, he just read the news, didn't express a lot of emotion. I mean, the most emotional he got was like he took his glasses off when JFK was shot, you know, I mean, but it was really kind of very, very composed most of the time. And in the 70s, you got into these news personalities where like the weatherman became like, you know, a
Yeah,
real
right.
personality, right? And so you had like, you know, Al Roker, and you had Tex Antoine and ABC in New York, and you had these people like, and people would tune into the news just because they liked watching these entertaining people, or they would start joking around like at the you know, they'd have a few different people reading the news, maybe a local news in New York, and they'd be like joking around with each other, and that was like a new thing in the 70s. So like I think that yeah, 60 Minutes, all this stuff, they started realizing that yeah, there's a lot of money, and we can get more market share if we can make the news more entertaining. I just think
Right.
it's interesting because still in foreign news, even though it's like BBC will only cover certain things, and they'll probably cover a lot of more of like the royal family, right, and the BBC. But you know, if you look at German news or French news, or even like Russian news or Chinese news, it's fairly similar. Like they'll have a lot more on foreign, what's going on in foreign uh, governments and foreign countries, and they'll like Russian news typically will have, you know, Putin is meeting with so and so, such and such a leader from this country, and they'll show the meeting in the Kremlin,
And
which is kind of
he's getting there riding on horseback without
yeah, right. No, typically not. I mean, they'll have that, but not on the nightly news in Russia. You know, they'll have that in the magazine, but generally it's going to be, you know,
Yeah.
these official meetings, or you sign a declaration on this or that, and that's kind of the way it was in the Soviet Union. You know, you'd have Brezhnev meeting with foreign leaders in the Kremlin. Um, and even the BBC. I mean, it's kind of like, it seems like that's more the traditional news approach, that used to be what it was like here, but now it's become kind of like Newsertainment, and there's a personality who reads the news. Like, so it's ABC News with David Murr,
Right.
whatever. But of course,
Yeah.
David Murr was off last night, but it's still ABC News with David Murr, you know,
Right.
with so and so substituting. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're trying to come up with somebody who's, and they haven't been able to come up with anybody who's really, I guess Tom Brokaw was like the last big star, you know.
Right. And I guess the pinnacle of the format is obviously Rachel Maddow just telling fantasy stories every night.
Yeah, but she's not a newscaster. She's kind of like she's a commentator.
Yeah, but oh yeah.
But the same,
true.
but
At
the
least
same idea.
you're right. It is at least packaged as
Right.
commentary and not.
And then at the end they
news.
say, well, we'll see you tomorrow night, as if they can see you, you know.
Ah,
Right. So it's kind
yeah.
of like, you know, if you're by yourself, that's your friend, and the newscaster is your friend, and
Yeah.
it's I mean, it's a sad commentary on the